Hi, I'm New York Times Metro reporter Jeff Mays sitting in for Sam Roberts. On this program, we feature leading newsmakers and the New York Times journalists who cover them. This week, I'll speak with visual reporter Ashley Wu about the extensive connections between Donald Trump and the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. But first, New York City Mayor Eric Adams faces mounting challenges. An FBI investigation into campaign finance irregularities led to his indictment, while the migrant crisis and public safety concerns erode public confidence. Governor Kathy Hochul has stepped in to reshape his administration. My colleague, New York Times reporter Dana Rubenstein, joins me now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So after the mayor's indictment, we saw a flood of people leaving his administration, and that caused a lot of concern, and Governor Hochul became involved in the situation. Is that correct?
Right. Well, Governor Hochul has a really powerful lever at her disposal, which is that she can almost unilaterally remove the mayor from office if she were to so decide. So she has leverage. He recognizes it, and she, called him and did ask him to basically clean house, and he has been.
And so there have been several new hires, right?
Right. So I mean, the departures have included many of the most important people in the administration: his first deputy mayor, his schools chancellor, his police commissioner, his deputy mayor for public safety, his senior advisor. And he has named a new first deputy mayor, Maria Torres Springer, who, if you think about City Hall as sort of divided between people who are loyalists and people who are sort of technocrats, she's very squarely in the technocratic category, and a lot of the sort of permanent government folks are happy with her ascension to that top role. But, not everyone who is considered a loyalist has left the administration, and that includes his chief advisor, Ingrid Lewis-Martin, who is still,
Yeah, has the mayor given any explanation for why she has not? She had her phone seized by the FBI as well, and received a subpoena. Has he given any explanation on why she has not left the administration?
Right. So investigators with the Manhattan DA's office did seize her phone. He has not given any explanation. I mean, the sort of the larger, or what people say is the larger irony, is that he is himself, he's under indictment, right? He's the only one so far who is under indictment, and he obviously remains in office. I think Governor Hochul's been asked about that, and she points out that he was elected and that everyone who works for him, serves at will.
Now, these are separate investigations from our understanding, right?
Yeah, so there's 4 federal investigations into his administration, and one from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. And the 4 federal, 3 are from the Southern District of New York, Manhattan, and 1 is from the Eastern District in Brooklyn.
And I'm wondering, has these shifts affected the mayor's administration to continue running the city?
Well, I mean, it does seem like he has lost a lot of public confidence, and many people consider his mayoral administration to be sort of on its last legs. There's huge questions about whether he could ever win re-election. So he doesn't really have political capital to speak of. And I think that certainly affects his ability to do big things. I think that the smaller sort of regular governmental functions will continue to operate as normal. I mean, the agencies effectively run themselves.
And these furthering investigations, do we expect the mayor to be involved in any of these issues? For example, with Chancellor Banks or First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. Do we expect those investigations to in fact affect the investigations that are revolving around the mayor individually?
We don't know. We do expect that in the investigation that culminated in his indictment, that there will be at least one superseding indictment. The prosecutors have said as much, and they also strongly hinted that there would be other indictments tied to that investigation, other defendants named.
And the mayor is up for re-election next year. Has this affected his efforts at all to win re-election?
Yeah, I mean, his fundraising is really very limited right now, and then he's got this legal defense trust that he can use to pay for his legal expenses, and it's I believe in the red. So yeah, he has some real money troubles facing him. These attorneys that are representing him are very expensive, and it's not clear how he will pay for their services.
Is there any sense that the mayor will resign? There have been several calls for him to resign from several of his colleagues in government. Any sense that he will heed those calls?
No, I mean, he said yesterday that he would resign if he were convicted. But he has been really steadfast and consistent in saying that he's not going anywhere, that he was elected to serve as mayor, and he will continue to do so. He's also continued to insist that he's running for re-election, even though there are very few outward signs that that sort of re-election campaign is kicking into gear in any real way.
You cover city government. I'm wondering if you've had any sense on whether these investigations around the mayor and his inner circle, have they affected public trust at all?
Well, I mean, his poll numbers are really very, poor, very low right now. So yeah, I do think there's a sense that people in New York City have an understanding of what's going on, and that his administration is really wounded, for sure.
Going back to the governor, is there any sense that the changes that she requested the mayor make have made a difference so far?
Well, I think they've gone some way towards creating a greater sense of stability, and I think that it was probably one of her primary goals ahead of the November election. There's a fear that, having the Democratic mayor of the biggest city in the United States be sort of like such a public story and not a good story for the Dems would hurt them in some way in this coming election. So I think there's a desire to sort of quiet things down until after the election is over.
But recently, former President Trump issued some support for Mayor Adams, right? How does that look?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. The mayor has been sort of hinting that the indictment is some sort of retribution on behalf of the federal government for its criticism of Biden's management of the migrant crisis, and he has gotten, some support for that sentiment from former President Trump, who's basically just echoed that conspiracy theory, and sort of backed the mayor and sort of compared his own legal troubles to the mayor's as of a piece. And, the mayor has not exactly disavowed Trump's sentiments. He hasn't sought really to distance himself from them.
But in terms of accepting that support, has the mayor come out and, agreed with President Trump at all? He's endorsed Kamala Harris in this election.
He has, but he has not really created distance between himself and Trump on this issue, which is, a very interesting phenomenon. It probably speaks, at least in part, to the fact that his base, they're in the Venn diagram of Trump supporters and Eric Adams supporters, there is some area of overlap that he probably doesn't want to alienate. And then, there's all sorts of speculation that he secretly hopes that if Trump is elected and Eric is convicted, that Trump will pardon him. That's all speculative. But yeah, it's that whole dynamic is pretty interesting.
What's next? What can we expect next in the next couple of weeks dealing with the mayor's case?
There might be some new indictments, certainly more legal filings. But yeah, it's, the ball's very much in the court of the prosecutors, and we sort of have to wait and see what happens.
Thank you, Dana, for your reporting. While New York Mayor Eric Adams faces a federal probe into alleged campaign finance violations, the Supreme Court has recently been showing some leniency on public corruption. What might that mean for fighting public corruption in the future? Joining me now from Washington is New York Times Supreme Court reporter and sidebar columnist Adam Liptak. Adam, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be with you.
You wrote in June about a Supreme Court decision, the Schneider case. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit how that changed the burden of proof for bribery and corruption charges.
So Snyder was the fifth in a series of cases since 2016, where the court over and over again, and 4 times unanimously, said that federal statute aimed at state and local public corruption had been read too broadly by prosecutors, and the court overturned 5 different convictions. That last one, Snyder, was an interesting question of whether if you get a reward after the fact, a so-called after-the-fact gratuity, not a before-the-fact bribe, does the law cover that? And the court said no, that someone can express gratitude for a public action, even though it's fairly plain that the only reason they're doing that is because you did something on their behalf. So that's a flavor of that question. But the granddaddy of these questions, and the one that really might seem to apply to the mayor, is the 2016 case involving Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell, where the court said there was all kinds of tawdry, ugly gifts given to the governor: a Rolex, luxury jet travel, loans, shopping sprees, the use of a vacation home, the use of a Ferrari. So there's no question that there was a quid in the quid pro quo. But the court said the quo side, the what did the governor do for this donor, was not an official act, even though he arranged for meetings and leaned on officials to do stuff for the donor, but that stuff never happened. There was not enough of a quo. And you can hear, even as I described that might be similar to what Adams is facing. There's little question he got valuable stuff from the Turkish government and its allies. Whether he did enough for them in an official act way is a tough question.
The mayor is accused of also accepting favors from foreign nationals. I'm wondering, does that make a difference in this case that you're talking about at the moment?
That's a very good question. That's a separate line of attack by prosecutors, and that may be a more promising line of attack because although the court has loosened campaign finance regulations in many ways, no one thinks that foreigners should be financially participating in American elections. Almost no one.
Even given these rulings, these charges that Mayor Adams are facing are very serious, right?
Oh, of course. Now, federal prosecutors don't bring such charges lightly against the sitting mayor of a major American city. But the music of these 5 cases I've described at the Supreme Court means that it's not a slam dunk.
You recently wrote about an upcoming article, I believe, in the Yale Journal of Law, with a professor who argued that some of the rulings we've been seeing from the Supreme Court around public corruption are in a way designed to let politicians, quote, keep getting away with off the hook, and also an effort to make themselves look good. The Supreme Court has also faced some questions about their ethical practices as well. How do you think these cases are related?
So they're broadly similar, right? You have Clarence Thomas in particular, but also Samuel Alito, accepting luxury travel and more, and quite arguably failing to disclose it as required by law. And here, too, it's not clear what the quo is, although you would think that some of these donors have goals, maybe only general ones. But the author of this piece, Josh Chaffetz, was making the point that the more the court makes politicians look tawdry, the better the court looks by comparison, or at least that's their goal.
So the standards have been changing. Is there a clear definition now of what indicates sort of corrupt behavior?
You know, it's hard to say because these federal statutes vary. And depending on which one the court is looking at, they're slightly different. But it does seem that we know at least 2 things. The thing the donor is paying for needs to be quite concrete. It needs to be a government official act. And it has to take place, the payment has to take place before the fact, not an after the fact gratuity. And then beyond that, the other thing I'd say, and this is important, the indictment we have now may not be the final indictment. It's not at all unusual for the government to come forward with additional charges. So I don't mean to suggest that this is not a major, major problem for the mayor, but I do mean to suggest that it's not an open and shut case.
So it does not seem to be clear necessarily at this point whether these decisions will ultimately help the mayor or not. Surely if you were his lawyer, you have to be looking at these recent rulings and feeling good about them. But overall, in the long term, do you think these decisions will have an impact on how this case is prosecuted or how jurors consider these charges?
Again, it's a little hard to say because there are many moving pieces. But if you ask me what the general trend is, how state and local politicians indicted by federal prosecutors on political corruption charges have done, they've won 5 times out of 5. So that tells you something.
Adam, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Coming up next, Project 2025 and its many ties to Donald Trump. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is an exhaustive 900-page policy blueprint for the next Republican presidency. Critics view it as a threat to democratic principles, especially under Trump, while the candidate has attempted to create distance from it. Visual reporter Ashley Wu joins us now to explain her recent New York Times interactive reporting that illustrates in detail the extensive ties between Donald Trump and this controversial plan. Ashley, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So tell us, what exactly is Project 2025?
So Project 2025 is a plan, it's a conservative plan from the Heritage Foundation, as you said, for policy recommendations and staffing recommendations for the next Republican presidency, in this case, Donald Trump, if he were to win in November.
And are there any specific pillars of this plan? What are the pillars of this plan?
Yeah, there's 4 pillars to Project 2025. One is policy, which is this document that our piece focused on. One is personnel. It's this big database of potential appointees, thousands of people that have been vetted to be ideologically and sound and loyal to Trump that they could recommend for the next administration. There's a training program to help potential appointees be ready on day one, and also a playbook for the first 180 days. So as I said, our project focuses on the first pillar, which is the policy, that 900-page document called the Mandate for Leadership. And we focused on the authors and editors and contributors behind that document.
And tell us a little bit, this is a 900-page document. How did you and your colleagues at the New York Times break this down?
Yeah, it is a large document. We wanted to focus on the people that created it. So not necessarily the policies themselves, although we do get into that in the story, but we wanted the piece to be focused on the people and their specific connections to Trump. So at the beginning of this document, they have a list of authors and also a list of contributors, totaling over 300 people. And so we wanted to catalog that specific list.
Now, President Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025. Has he taken an official stance on some of the ideas listed in that 900-page document?
Yeah, his stance has been that he hasn't read the document, doesn't know who's behind it, and yes, his campaign has tried to distance themselves from the document, saying that actually that there are even potentially banning people from the transition team that have been linked to this document. But from our reporting and what we know and the extensive connections that he has with the people behind this document, that may be unlikely that he isn't influenced by them should a second administration happen.
And your reporting, the very detailed reporting that you did, shows that there are extensive ties between former President Trump and the people who wrote and Project 2025. Can you give us a few examples that come to mind of the deep connections that you see?
Yeah, sure. So it is split into authors and editors, which are 40 of them, and each of them wrote one of the chapters or co-wrote what chapter in this 900-page document. And then there's a list of about 260 contributors who don't have bylines in the actual document, but helped develop these ideas and helped probably write as well. And so some examples are, one that comes to mind, he's an author of a chapter in the first section. His name is Dennis Dean Kirk, and he was a senior advisor in a part of Trump's administration that focused on personnel and hiring. It's called the Office of Personnel Management. And he wrote a chapter in there on personnel, and he was responsible or involved in an executive order called Schedule F that Trump signed near the end of his presidency that basically would have allowed him to fire a bunch of federal workers and replace them with people that he deemed loyal to him. President Biden, he reversed it at the beginning of his presidency, but Trump has said that he will reinstate it if he wins in November.
Right.
So that's one link as an example. Another link is Ken Cuccinelli, who was the acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security during the Trump administration, and he wrote a chapter on Homeland Security in this document, calling for things like militarizing the southern border to secure it, and completing the border wall, which, as we know, was a central goal of Trump's first administration.
Right. And so the leaders of Project 2025, you know, the Heritage Foundation is involved, but who is actually leading the effort to sort of put this together? Are there any particular people that are considered the leaders of this effort?
Yeah, I mean, the folks that wrote the document, I can't speak to like the leaders as much right now, but the president of the Heritage Foundation, of Kevin D. Roberts, is still the president. He's been president since 2021. And one of his connections to Trump was that he rode on his plane to a heritage conference back in 2021.
Right.
And yeah, so the leaders are heavily behind this document. But yeah, nothing more specific than that.
This is not the first time the Heritage Foundation has written a plan,
No,
right?
no,
Could
no,
you
no.
tell us about that?
Yeah,
And
so-
what do you think makes Project 2025 a little different?
Yeah, sure. Actually, this is the 9th edition of the Mandate for Leadership. The first edition was published in 1981 after Reagan won. And yeah, so this is the 9th edition. It was published in April 2023. And every 4-ish years, they come up with a version of these plans for the next Republican administration. So that's not what's different here. I think the difference is the sweeping nature of it and how detailed it goes. The Heritage Foundation has kind of convened more than 100 other conservative organizations under its leadership and umbrella to develop these really detailed policy and personnel plans and recommendations for the next administration. So that's what makes it unique.
And you talked a little bit about some of the policy proposals. What are some of the other major shifts in policy that we might see if President Trump wins and Project 2025 is implemented?
Yeah, one major part of the document is talking about consolidating and escalating executive power. So bringing a lot of independent agencies under presidential control. So an example of that is Schedule F that I mentioned before, which is kind of picking and choosing loyalists to Trump. Another thing is shrinking social programs, so rolling back protections for LGBTQ communities, not necessarily regarding abortion as healthcare, getting rid of the education department, and also sweeping changes to the Department of Justice to kind of erode that independence that they have with the White House currently. Those are some other key policies that are outlined in the document.
And all of the organizations that are involved in this, is this a situation where they're having input for their specific areas? Or are you having people focused on, abortion rights, send in specific areas, education? How do you any sense of how this is all working to come together?
Yeah, it is sort of clear through the document, like they have in the beginning, this sort of list of organizations on the advisory board, and you can see how some of their policies or their goals align with the sections that are being talked about in the document. So abortion is actually one of the topics where the Project 2025 and the Trump agenda differ a little bit. Project 2025 is pretty explicit about wanting to not treat abortion as healthcare, and Trump has shifted some of his opinions and ideas on this as the campaign has gone on. So yeah, there are organizations that are involved in certain parts, but it's not super clear in the document necessarily a one-to-one comparison.
This is so extensive, so many ideas in this. I'm wondering, it seems like this might be a perfect fit for a visual piece. Tell me a little bit about why you thought this would work as a visual piece, and what did you sort of set out to accomplish when you started the piece?
Yeah, my colleague Elena who spearheaded this project, we, as visual reporters, are always trying to present information in a understandable way, especially with a lot of data, a lot of information, like you said, in a way that readers can either glean information from it very quickly or use a database to search for themselves and come to their own opinion. So we kind of went with that second approach of let's put all of the names that are listed in this document in one place, and so someone can easily, search a connection to Trump, see the numbers for themselves. We write out all the numbers for you. And so I really encourage readers to kind of take a look and, come to their own conclusions as well.
Right. I'm wondering how you see Project 2025 being used in this year's election. There's been a lot of talk about it. There was a lot of talk earlier on. Is it still a major issue in this election?
Yeah, I think so. Democrats definitely are trying to make it a big issue for the Trump campaign. They want Project 2025 to be like analogous to his agenda. He does have his own agenda that he and his campaign have written called Agenda 47. He did not write Project 2025. The point of our project was to show the connections. These are people he trusts. He's employed before in an administration that he has personal connections with. So although he didn't write it, it's important to kind of understand that the link is still there. And because of how influential the Heritage Foundation has been in the past, in Republican administrations, it would be pretty unlikely that he and his campaign wouldn't be influenced by them in the future.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your extensive reporting.
Thanks.
That's it for today's show. Don't forget to download the CUNY TV app where you can catch our weekly program on the go, anytime, anywhere. Thank you for watching. I'm Jeff Mays, filling in for Sam Roberts and CUNY TV.